Welcome to Degrees of Maternity, a channel devoted to nurturing real, personal, and professional growth by bringing about a sense of self-awareness and encouraging life improvements for the long term. I invite you to pull up a seat, sit down at the table, and make yourself comfortable. I want you to feel at home because today's discussion has everything to do with productivity offenders. This video has been inspired by the Degrees of Maternity blog at degreesofmaternity.wordpress.com. And I've linked the original blog posts covering today's topic in the description box below. Now, if you're new to this channel, I'd appreciate it if you continue to visit me. So why don't you go ahead and click on the subscribe button below, as well as hit the notification bell so you can be alerted whenever a new video comes out. Okay, well, enough of that. Let's get into it. In this installment of The Art of People Business, I'm not discussing how people may have misunderstandings on work mantras such as work smarter, not harder, if you don't work, you don't eat, work first, play later, there is no substitute for hard work, and hard work always pays off. No, not at all. As a matter of fact, 4 out of the 5 quotes are pretty self-explanatory in my opinion. It's that work smarter, not harder saying that can somewhat be debatable on its true meaning, depending on who you talk to, and might make for an interesting future video topic. But I digress. What I really want to draw your attention to is the problematic worker you might find in the workplace, home, classrooms of all levels of academia, volunteer and charity organizations, individual and team sports, social organizations and memberships, in politics, in education, in the entertainment industry, in the food industry, in the medical field, in the legal field, in religion, in, well, the list, and I do love lists, could go on and on. So I'll stop here. What I'm trying to convey is that the misguided worker mentality is absolutely everywhere. I want to focus in on some of the repeat offenders in the area of work-related activity or getting things done. These folks are easy to distinguish from the crowd, and you can find them in your personal as well as professional space. I'm guessing that in the course of your lifetime, you've probably come across 1 or 2 of these characters, or perhaps you are one of these characters. I've personally interacted with or observed all 5 categories of misguided worker that I will do my best to describe. They're a complicated bunch, to say the least, and I can't claim that my experiences with them have been pleasant by any means. And here's my best attempt to introduce you to the misguided worker. Number 1, the entitled worker. Now, this worker has a mentality that says, the world, or maybe I should narrow this down to my family, friends, the community, my neighborhood, Jim next door, or my boss Francine, owes me. Therefore, I should be rewarded for the work that I do. But hold up, I should also be rewarded for the work I don't do. Wait, what? You heard this correctly. How could you possibly have a serious conversation about work ethic with this type of worker? These individuals take an attitude that no matter what, they should be rewarded for the work they expended no effort or energy in accomplishing just because of who they are in relation to other individuals. The most expedient way to describe these folks, in my personal opinion, is spoiled. Or maybe I'm being too harsh. What do you think? Have you met this person? How did he or she come off to you? Now, I haven't taken an actual survey or anything, but don't most people believe in working for what they want and earning what they get by working hard? I know I'm posing a lot of questions here, but I want you to dig deep and consider how you would honestly answer. I would venture to guess that the world, in most cases, isn't going to give you much for free. Oh, and let me clarify my position on entitlement. I do believe that there are some groups of people in this world who have been historically, continuously, and systemically disenfranchised, and are entitled to certain reparations because of horrific, unfair, and unjustified treatment that led and continues to lead to their disadvantaged state in the world. I'm most certainly not talking about these folks. However, there have been many individuals in these groups that have risen up in the face of blatant adversity and been successful in accomplishing their goals and aspirations without encouragement, help, and support. While I do believe that people at a disadvantaged state need assistance at times, I'm also a non-supporter of individuals using their disadvantaged state as an excuse for not taking charge of their lives and working toward goals that will lead toward life improvements. In other words, no matter what state we're in, we should take the support and opportunities we're given and use those things in positive ways to help propel ourselves forward in life and be willing to help others along the way. For purposes of this video, my reference to the entitled worker simply describes any individual, no matter what state he or she is in, that has all the access to the tools and resources needed to be successful and productive, but chooses to work beneath his or her ability while still expecting all the perks that come with performing work-related activities at a high level. If the disenfranchised can manage to get things done and appreciate being rewarded for their efforts without having the rite of passage to everything that can make life easier for them, then what rightful excuse does the entitled worker have for expecting something for nothing? In an honest exchange, I do believe both parties usually expect to get something of value out of the agreement. So, what value are you offering, entitled worker? Number 2, the credit stealing worker. Are you kidding me? Do we actually have people that go around taking credit for other people's work? Sure we do. Unfortunately, it happens all too frequently. And how do these offenders think they can constantly get away with hijacking someone else's effort? Well, nobody stops them, so they keep doing it. That's my guess anyway. It seems like the human race has encountered this worker throughout the ages, and the residue left behind can take on several forms. Most commonly, this worker's activities, or lack thereof, look a lot like cheating, stealing, and lying in a myriad of forms, such as plagiarism, copyright infringement, patent infringement, college entrance exam cheating, test cheating of any kind, use of steroids to bulk up for sports, outright stating that you completed the work that someone else actually completed, a parent accepting praise for how well a child turned out when in fact that parent was never actively involved in the rearing of that child, identity theft, literally stealing someone's credit, receiving recognition for a group achievement that you never contributed to in any form or fashion. Sounds like the next worker we'll be discussing. I know I got pretty specific with some of the examples, but I wanted to shed some light on how credit stealing can rear its ugly head in any type of work-related setting, from the personal side of the spectrum all the way to the professional side of the spectrum and everywhere in between. Number 3, the won't pull your own weight worker. Oh boy, this worker has a working mentality signaling to him or her that surely someone else will be willing to pick up the slack that I leave behind. Right? Wrong. Okay, so this type of worker exhausts me physically because the thought that immediately comes to mind is how incredibly draining it is to work with these folks. You're basically taking on your work and all or some of theirs when they refuse to pull their own weight in work-related matters. Furthermore, this worker also exhausts me mentally. Here's why. It's difficult for me to understand how some people can so easily dump things off on others without so much as a thought of how inconsiderate and selfish such an action truly is. How is it that everyone else is required to get things done, but the won't pull your own weight worker thinks that he or she doesn't have to eat a piece of the work pie? Look at it from this vantage point. Would you want to be on the tug of war team, or any team for that matter, with this type of individual? This question is a no-brainer, of course. The answer is no, no, and no. I'm currently describing the type of worker that will leave you high and dry and apparently has very little consideration of how his or her lack of action affects those in his or her working relations. You can't count on these individuals to come through on their end of the bargain, and they're certainly not to be considered reliable, dependable, or loyal to the cause, the common good, or the overall goal to be achieved. Number 4, the naive worker. This type of worker is not an outright problematic worker in the sense that he or she intends to throw others under the bus in order to avoid or minimize the amount of work he or she must do. Instead, this person is a more innocent offender, and the offense usually indirectly affects others in its direct line of fire. In fact, the naive worker tends to simply underestimate the actual work itself in amount or complexity. This worker says, "I'm in way over my head. I never signed up for this." When in fact, yes, you did sign up for this. "This is harder than I thought it would be. I want out." The experts made it look a lot easier than this. "If I knew I was going to be getting into something like this, I never would have applied for it in the first place. I don't think I'm going to make it through the probationary period." Yikes. All I can say is that I've been there and done that. And honestly, I have my moments when I totally scream out in my mind, "What have I gotten myself into?" I would say such a reaction is normal for someone like me who went from an employee setting to a homeschooling setting and then to a creative entrepreneurial setting. Don't you think? There are many days that I learn to do something new, and in the midst of temporarily celebrating my accomplishment, I come to realize that there are 3 new things that I need to wrap my head around. Work ethic, kick into gear. But as naive as I was in coming into the boss lady ranks, and as naive as I still am about some things, I've never entertained throwing in the towel. What I'm doing now is my livelihood, and I have a made-up mind to make this work. I guess what I'm trying to say is that out of all of the misguided workers thus far, the naive worker might possibly be the easiest one to rehabilitate. Number 5, the no sense of urgency worker. Okay, this type of worker mentality can't be hurried or rushed. It's not too concerned with hitting deadlines, being punctual, responding to emergencies, or competing against the clock in any sort of racing or time-driven situation. The individual I'm describing here seems to exist in an alternate world where he or she is told that you can tend to matters when you feel good and ready to. And what happens if such a worker never feels like getting to the matter at hand? Well, I would guess that the effect of such a cause would result in starting on tasks, but possibly never finishing them. Or maybe tasks are drawn out so long that they end up being picked up by someone who will actually get them done in a timely manner. Sounds like this person could be the first cousin to the won't pull your own weight worker. Individuals who function in this somewhat of a lackadaisical funk can be difficult to reconcile in the mind of those who live in the real world. Why? Let me see. Could it be that everyone, and I do mean everyone, has demands put on them to perform tasks within certain time frames at some point in their lives? Little children included? Now just ask my 9-year-old if his teacher in 4th grade allows him to create his own work schedule and do his own thing in his own time during the course of a school day. No, sir. No, ma'am. He has to fall in line just like every other child and adult at his school and perform his duties with a sense of urgency. Let's call it meeting expectations. And if he chooses to dance to the beat of his own drum in this setting, guess what? There will be consequences to pay, and some of those consequences will spill over to me and my husband. Here's something I want you to remember. The neglect of one falls into the laps of others. Time is not of the essence with these folks, so I guarantee you won't want someone with this mentality to assume any positions in such fields as the medical, law enforcement, fire and safety, transportation, and military, for example. And I'd certainly be hesitant in asking this worker to babysit my child, house and pet sit, if I had any pets, while I go out of town, and work as my virtual assistant at Degrees of Maternity. I'm just saying. Now, on to some of the problematic situations that misguided workers bring about. Here come the problems. You have to understand that individuals who have little regard for how their actions affect others always create some kind of chaos that the others end up facing or having to account for in some way. In the following list I'll provide you, I'll give you 3 difficult situations that can result when working with each of the 5 types of misguided worker. All right, and here we go. Let's start with the entitled worker. Number 1, work doesn't get done by this individual. Number 2, this person's work may have to be completed by someone else. Number 3, there may be delays in meeting expectations, deadlines, and the overall intended goal because work is shifted to another person's shoulders. For the credit stealing worker, number 1, work doesn't get done by this individual. Number 2, this person's so-called work was done by someone else. Number 3, recognition for a job well done is given to an undeserving party. For the won't pull your own weight worker, number 1, work doesn't get done by this individual. Number 2, this worker's work or this person's work may have to be completed by someone else. Number 3, someone refusing to do his or her part can result in an entire group of people being negatively and unfairly punished because one worker didn't come through. For the naive worker, number 1, work doesn't get done by this individual. 2, this person may just quit and bail out on the work altogether, and someone else will have to pick up the pieces, no matter how messy they are. And number 3, this worker may perform work unsatisfactorily that can negatively misrepresent an entire entity. It's important to have the right people for the job. For the no sense of urgency worker, number 1, work doesn't get done by this individual. 2, this person's work may have to be completed by someone else who can hit the deadline. And 3, someone refusing to do his or her part can result in an entire group of people being negatively and unfairly punished because one worker didn't come through. I don't want to belabor the point, but are you seeing a pattern here? I am. I can sum it all up by highlighting the obvious fact that misguided workers create unfavorable situations for those they have working relationships with. And for individuals who have a desire to function in the real world, the fallout from the unproductive nature of the misguided can lead to additional work for the productive worker. Is this fair? No. Does the work, no matter who does it, still need to get done? Yes. So, what's the solution to this conundrum? And here come some suggested solutions. Well, I'm afraid that there are no simple answers here. Someone might quickly state the obvious, which is, don't do the misguided worker's work for him or her. Sounds commonsensical, I know. But again, the answer is more complex than that because work still has to get done even if the misguided worker isn't the one doing it. So what do you do? Well, if you can do so without reaping negative repercussions, put the onus back on the misguided worker to do his or her own work and refuse to do it. Ideally, this would be the way to go every time, but we are living in the real world, aren't we? Evaluate your work behaviors and take ownership of the work assigned to you. Never rely on others to take on your responsibilities, unless you're in a position where you're unable to. You may not be able to control what others do, but you can control what you do. Document the work that you do somewhere. This habit is an excellent one to adopt for any personal or professional work-related setting. For instance, at the professional workplace, it's just good practice to note on paper or your computer or some other safe place the noteworthy tasks you've completed and accomplishments you've achieved, because such documentation will come in handy when you're required to complete your performance review at the end of the year. And it will be especially helpful if you ever have to prove that you were the one who completed certain tasks and not the credit stealer. Uphold a stellar work ethic always. Believe me, it won't go unrecognized. Let the pride you take in doing your work speak volumes for your character. It will be very difficult for you to be pinpointed as a slacker or someone who's not carrying his or her own weight. And when work disconnects happen, you'll be far from someone's mind when considering workplace offenders. Let your supervisor, manager, or leader know what's going on when you have working relationships with misguided workers that are negatively affecting your progress in getting things done. Don't wait until a situation escalates before you make the higher-ups aware that a problem is brewing. Make sure you engage in cross-training opportunities that will assist you in learning other skill sets from other jobs in case you ever have to fill in. It's never a pleasant situation when you're required to complete work that you're not equipped to handle. Arm yourself with knowledge. Aim for productive and not reactive. Or I should say, aim for proactive and not reactive. Then lastly, add your own solutions to the mix, because I clearly don't have all the answers. If you have some suggestions that haven't been mentioned, I'd love to hear them. So please do share. I know some of the solutions don't appear to favor the hard worker. A lot of times the do-gooder gets dumped on. I do admit that, and I've personally experienced this ironic occurrence in different situations. However, I always keep the mindset that good opportunities tend to find good people who uphold their integrity, morals, and strong work ethic, even in the face of adversity. In the long run, it will never be to your advantage to turn to the dark side. Eventually, the misguided worker will get his or her fair due in some shape or form. Mark my words on that one. Dirty catches up with everyone eventually, and you don't want to be caught up in that big ball of messiness. So stay true to what you know is right to do. Lead by example and be that guided worker that can direct others on a positive work-related path. Here's a final thought. If you find yourself in one of the 5 categories of misguided worker, get out. I hope you all were edified by today's table talk. I will have more to come. And if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.